There we go. Great. So yeah, welcome everyone who's joined here, and noticing what's going on for you in this moment as we dive into this next 50 minutes. Notice what parts are present. With different stories, beliefs, thoughts, sensations, and particularly any sensations in the body. Noticing how the different parts of us inhabit the body. And this is an invitation. This is an invitation to roll the welcome mat out for whatever is present here. And as you tune into these different parts of yourself here, see how that awareness shifts anything. Maybe as the parts feel welcomed. Maybe as we consciously make more space for these parts. Maybe there is a sense of allowing, accepting, melting, surrendering, and in a very physical, practical sense, we're surrendering the body to the flow of gravity, down, down to the ground. Oftentimes these parts can inhabit the body and contract certain areas. Typically the shoulders rise up, the neck becomes very contracted and tense. There can be some holding of the breath, holding of the tummy and the diaphragm. And as we allow the space for these parts to be with us, to be with self, self with a capital S. Notice if there's a sense of the body surrendering to the laws of nature. So we're no longer working against gravity, we're allowing gravity to pull us down, to hug us closer to the ground. See if you can allow on your next out breath to maybe yawn or sigh the breath out as a way of allowing the jaw to release. And really, nature shows us how to live with adversity, how to survive harsh conditions. And what comes to me is when trees grow in areas where they're exposed to high wind, they grow closer to the ground. They seek the protection of the earth away from the harsh winds that risks the trees being swept away. So in their innate wisdom, trees have learned that to be closer to the ground means to survive, to continue despite the high winds. And so the invitation here is to engage in biomimicry, allowing yourself to mimic what goes on out there in nature, in the world, in the universe, and allowing your body to take up and live through the same wisdom that unites us all. See if you can allow yourself to be close, loosening any grip, any tension, muscles relaxing, tendons, ligaments relaxing. See if you can actively imagine the ground receiving you, the surface you're sat on, fully supporting your body weight. This solid beingness of the ground is like self as a particle. See if you can imagine as though the leaves falling gently through the air and softly landing on a grassy carpet. See if you can imagine the parts softly, softly settling down to the ground of being, the ground of self, self as a particle. This is the aspect of self that's very much actionable in the world through the 8 C's, through the 5 Ps. For me, it feels like the yang of the yin and yang. It has the ability to interact. This is the being in the world that Jesus talks about. This is the embodiment of the divine. Very much experiential, embodied, real. And see if you can allow yourself to really breathe into this sense of being received. All the parts that are present here, being received by the ground of beingness. And as we do that, we're allowing all that is present here. We're allowing the breath to be just as it is. To fall softly within the body, just as the body falls softly on the surface. And the surface that you're on is held by the ground, signaling our belonging in the family of things, not just our biological family, but the interconnectedness of all beings. And if your feet are resting on the ground, if you can allow sending imaginary roots of your being down into the ground so that it may mingle and join and co-regulate and co-create with others. Sense of kinship, solidarity, togetherness, most of all belonging. And see if you can be here with the idea that there's no part that's out of place. There's no part that is a mistake. There is no part that doesn't somehow belong. Self has rolled out the welcome mat, the ground of being for all parts. Self has no ability to judge one part as more worthy over another. It is the unconditionally loving, receptive, welcoming, allowing ground of beingness. See if you can feel that. See if you can allow on the next in-breath, drawing in more of that grounded, allowing, accepting energy. And as we're breathing out, we're allowing the parts to continue to land in the presence of self. This isn't about unblending from self. It's more about noticing that self is greater, even greater than a sum of parts. And so there's space for self to witness everything that is unfolding within its field of awareness. Self nourishes all, accepts all, loves all, welcomes all. And I can't help but to notice the gentle smile on my face when I really rest in that sense of beingness with self. There is no sense of right or wrong in this spaciousness here. It's like what Rumi talks about in his field. There is a field of no right or wrongdoings. I'll meet you there. Rumi really echoes the words of self, the intention of self. And how lovely that these parts finally can land in the family of things. All things, not just inner, but outer. There's a space for each part. And you might notice that as we open up the space for all these parts, maybe more and more come in. Maybe more and more parts come out of their hiding places into the meadows of self, landing softly. What do these parts need? Do they need a blanket? Do they need a picnic? Is there an offering that self could give as an open invitation for more and more parts to allow themselves to step into the meadow, Rumi's field? No right, no wrong, just beingness, just acceptance, just allowance. And see if you can bring that into the body. See if you can embody this. These practices are so much about the experiential knowing. Knowing is a verb. Knowing lives in each and every cell of your body. Assuredness that self is here, always. Always ready to receive whatever wants to land upon its canvas, its screen of awareness. See if you can imagine absorbing this knowing into every part of your body, every cell, breathing, reverberating, radiating with self-energy. So see how it feels to be with self as a particle, embodied, actionable, present in the world, living with these 8 C's, the 5 P's, relationally co-regulating, co-creating with our friends, our family, our loved ones. Self helps us to manage and create relationships in the world that are based on the values and the natural innate qualities of self. The more we feel the warmth of self, the more we can radiate that to others. And the more we can feel others radiating their warmth to us. This is a world that is based on self-leadership. Really allowing this knowing to sink deeply into every part. And if you notice that there are still parts here that are hiding, that don't feel they can trust self, see if you can reassure them that although they may not feel brave enough or trusting enough to step into this grounded beingness of self, that they do already receive the energy of self, that they already possess within them the seed of warmth, the seed of love, the seed of acceptance. And that that is enough for now. That is enough for them to know for now, until they feel ready to join the rest of the family. So see if you can beam a heartfelt ray of golden light from self to all the parts that are still too scared, too shy, too mistrusting to join this gathering, this circle. See if you can take another embodied breath here. And Just as we've been tuning into self as a particle, imagine now that as your body is grounded, rooted, anchored, now tune into the space that you're sat in, the air around you, the space of the room. You might even be able to be so attuned in this moment that you can feel the air at your nostrils coming in and coming out. And being attuned to the temperature of the air. As it comes in through the nose or the mouth, and as it leaves. You might even be aware of the air particles brushing your skin on your cheeks, your forehead, your nose, your arms, your legs. 1,000 kisses, 1,000,000 kisses, infinite kisses. Upon you, upon your body. And as you're tuning into this self as a wave, you might become aware of the edges, the boundary of your body blurring and merging with the background, with the spaciousness of the room. The essence of self that we're tuning into here is self as a wave. This is the transpersonal, transcendental aspect of self. This is what Jesus would refer to as not of this world. This is the Tao that can't be named. And this we all share. This self as a wave allows us to transcend any personal boundaries. And go beyond any sense of right or wrong, not just personally within the inner family, but now in the outer family too. And this self as a wave also allows us to join with source, with universal energy. And see what parts are present here when we make this very subtle discernment between self as a particle and self as a wave. And particularly stay closely attuned to any parts that prefer one over the other. Or that might find it easier to trust one over the other. And see if you can stay curious. And perhaps notice how there's no actual separation in between self as a wave, self as a particle, and parts. That it all unfolds within one field of infinite possibilities. And tuning into the sense of the both and here. We can't have parts without self. And so long as there is awareness of self, there must be also parts. There's freedom here for parts to roam freely and explore what it's like to be you, to express as the unique qualities, unique gifts that these parts come into existence with. This is all about reconciling the paradox of the both and. Self as the primal essence within which the play of parts unfolds. When we do the teaching of IFS through the lens of non-duality, for the intellectual, rational mind, it appears to be important to separate and distinguish these different aspects. Self as a wave, self as a particle, and parts. But in reality, you're everything all at once. The next breath you take, it's not simply self as a particle or self as a wave or parts. It's all of it at once. And so initially, when we come to this work, it makes sense to break it down, to tease out the strands but eventually we simply come to see ourselves as the totality of it all. And sometimes a nice way to convey this teaching is to imagine yourself on a continuous sliding scale. Imagine having a slider, and at one end there is more of an identification with parts, and at the other end there's more of an identification with self. And so it's helpful to see yourself as a perpetual blend, a loving embrace, just like the yin and yang, embracing each other within the circle. This is what it's like. There's a loving embrace that goes on. And initially it makes sense, especially for the parts that haven't yet become aware of this pervasive, all-encompassing presence of self. Initially, it makes sense to ask the parts to look around themselves, to look beyond and notice that which is aware of the part. We can refer to that as unblending. Initially, this appears to be a useful step in the process to wholeness and integration. But eventually, even this step ceases to be necessary. Because we've arrived at a point of embodied experiential knowing within every cell, within every breath, every heartbeat, every blink of an eye, every step. We've come to know ourselves as self, that which lovingly allows these precious parts to be in however they wish. Knowing all along that they're always home. And if any part ever does feel lost, wanders away, gets lost in the woods, self knows, like the lighthouse. Self knows that the light and the energy of self always brings the lost parts home. My good news to you is that parts cannot be lost forever. Self is available and open the entire time, and self trusts and knows that one day the part will open its heart to the visibility and presence of self. Self never left. Self was always here. Patiently waiting, knowing, abiding. And it's almost as though the moment these parts awaken to the presence of self has already been written for them. This is why self is so relaxed. It's almost as though self has the capacity to know how and when these parts return. And self knows that they've always been home all along. But what needed to be seen was that their belief in not being home was stopping or reducing the flow of energy into the part. And the moment the part awakens to the embodied knowing of self as the ever-present, all-encompassing, loving parent, it restores that sense of balance and harmony and wholeness, a well-being in the system. And we never heal alone these parts. Everybody is always watching. And so when one part awakens, it sends out a clear message to the other parts that this is possible. It is possible to awaken, to return to the glow and the warmth of self. So this is how self has this ability to unite. Through the waves of self. Each part has the ability to heal and to unite. See how it feels to be here in the presence of self. Although these parts feel very alone, they're very close, closer than close. And once one awakens, once one lights up, it's not long before the entire inner world begins to glow, a little bit like a handful of matches arranged in an unbreakable chain in a circle. If you light the first one, that one will light the next one. The next one will light the next one along. And before you know, you have an unbreakable chain of light. In a way, these parts too are walking each other home. Notice how your parts are feeling. Notice what's happening in the body, and maybe noticing if there's been any shifts, any insights. And if any parts surfaced, letting them know that you are here. And maybe if it feels right, setting an intention to return to that part the next time you have an opportunity. And letting your inner world know that we're going to transition back into the circle that we've created here, into this online space with each other. And allowing yourself to stretch, yawn, and allowing yourself to return back into this circle.